want to first ask about the fundamental research you did on the stock. It's my understanding from your presentation that most of the demand is driven from the convention business and not the individual, tourist market. So what research did you do, and what did you find? Did you talk to organizations like CFA Institute that do a lot of meetings, and what was their feedback about this organization versus competing entities that would offer convention space?
So the first thing that we did was we looked at the convention market as a whole. So there, we alluded to the fact in building out the growth rate, we utilized Smith Travel Research, which is a great industry resource. In addition to that, Ryman recently and every year, in fact, attends the JP Morgan Analyst Day for Hotels and REITs, which they provide a great packet on not just Ryman as a REIT, but other hotels and REITs within the industry and kind of where those hotels also operate. So there's really good information there as far as what cities are hot at the current market and where companies are looking to go. And then in addition to that, because we are from Nashville and their largest market is Nashville, we did a lot of research in town related to interviewing the head of the convention center and really getting a good understanding of, is growth going to continue in Nashville, and do we see it growing in the future, which we do.
I have a question. You all are from Nashville, correct?
Yes.
So obviously we're excited about Nashville, fundamentally. So you have a 7% growth rate that you use. Now, did you test that in the way we're bouncing back recession, there's a lot of pent-up demand. How does that compare to long-run numbers, other cities, et cetera?
To come up with our growth rate, we utilized data from the 4 cities that we operate in, and we came up with 7%, which is actually very close to what a historical average over the past 3 to 4 years has been for Ryman. And because we kind of said going forward, we see economic conditions similar to the past, say 2 or 3 years, recovery-wise, kind of a 2 to 3 growth in GDP, kind of continuing the recovery. So we assumed that taking a conglomerate of the markets in the cities, we were able to come together with a growth rate that we felt kind of encapsulated that.
Sure, and just to tag on to that, so Ryman in 2014 had a growth rate of 7.5%, so obviously it's very achievable. And additionally, their numbers for this coming year, which they posted, are up almost 10% in terms of bookings, which obviously, as we mentioned, they do forward bookings. And then with Marriott as their partner, it took them a little bit of time to kind of get acclimated to the bookings process for these larger groups compared to some of the smaller conventions that Marriott is used to. So we really think that they're just now hitting their stride. So 7% not only is doable, but it's reasonable for Ryman with that in mind, just because, as we said, December 31st, 2012 was when they finished being, when they began to be a REIT, So it's very reasonable, especially with the synergies that they have with Marriott. They've reduced a lot of their G&A expense and that sort of thing and achieved a lot of these synergies.
A lot of your assumptions are based on constant shares, but you also mentioned in another part of the presentation that external financing will be required. How confident are we that constant shares is a reasonable assumption?
So our forecast was based on the fact that we don't foresee them acquiring anything else within this next year, which is where our target price is set. So while we do acknowledge that if they wanted to purchase something else to grow through expansion that way, they would have to do so financing externally. But we're assuming a constant rate because we assume that that 7% growth that we're going to see is going to be organic within the hotels that they already operate, or already own, sorry.
And if I may as well, as they're actually organized as an umbrella partnership REIT, an UP REIT, and so they have a separate entity that operates beneath them, Ryman Hotel Properties, which they've said they will use those shares possibly to finance purchases if need be as well, in lieu of generating external financing.
Well, my question deals with the fact that they do have large contracts in the niche in which they operate. So did you perform any type of sensitivity regarding the loss of one of these large contracts?
So their single large contract is with Marriott, and it is a mutually beneficial relationship. So Marriott not only paid for the rights to serve as Ryman's operator at the beginning of their relationship, but they also receive a cut of the revenue every year. So there's not really an incentive for Marriott to leave at this point, and Marriott is also doing this type of relationship with several other REITs and hotel operators. For us, the biggest risk that we see is if there was business interruption to one of the properties, not necessarily related to the contract. And the company has done a really good job of covering that through business interruption insurance.
In addition, for the sensitivity analysis that we did do, we were more concerned about, on a two-table, the revenue growth rate that we came up with, as well as the price to FFO or price to AFFO ratio that we thought Ryman could command. And we tested it that way, and we found that there was some leeway for them to maybe not achieve that 7% and still be a very strong buy.
Okay, thank you.
One data point that really jumped out at me in your presentation is investors are demanding that what a 4.3% yield to own this stock, whereas they'll take only 2.2, for their peers. So what don't investors like about this? Why do they demand such a high yield to own this one, but not their peers? They must be seeing something negative or a higher risk factor in this stock versus their peers.
I think that recently, over the past year, there have been some pauses with Ryman. So they came through the period of converting to a REIT, and they did hit a few bumps in the road related to their relationship with Marriott and just working out how they would operate the hotels. However, they have come through that period. So I think you might see that dividend yield change as we go on, but I think it is related to that. And in addition to that, the company actually, the Opryland Hotel in Nashville in May of 2010 flooded, and they are still in the process of collecting those funds and recovering from that. So there is a little bit of hesitancy there, but on a go-forward basis, you might see that calm down because of the kinks that they worked out.
Are you factoring any future floods? We have global warming. Is that not a factor that we should be taking into account here?
It was a 100-year flood, so let's hope not. So, and they do have flood insurance now.
Throw another one out if my colleagues don't. So FFO versus AFFO, you average the two out. Why not pick one, defend it, and one is superior to the other? Why just average one if you think one is inferior to the other?
Well, FFO is more commonly used in the industry to value REITs, but we believe that our AFFO model supported our FFO valuation and that we should include both of them into our price target.
Which do you think is superior?
Well, from what analysts say, is FFO is superior, but AFFO is a more conservative number that takes into a few more line items into account.
What do you say, not what analysts say?
FFO.
No, but what day do you think that the $17 million in tax credit will be completely depleted? By what, when do you expect this $17 million in tax credit that Raymond has will be completely depleted?
So in our financial projections, we depleted them over the first 2 to 3 year period of our 5-year projection. So they have significantly decreased that number. So because they no longer are taxed, they are simply just running that out now and claiming those tax credits.
Okay.
The challenges they ran into that you mentioned with Marriott in terms of the REIT conversion, I'm assuming it's the same management team, so if they had problems there, why are you confident in this management team, and why won't we see future problems from the same management team, maybe the same problem or similar problems?
So I would say that the problem was more on just getting the Ryman management team and the Marriott management team in sync. The Marriott obviously has a great reputation within the industry and has done this before, and Ryman does as well. So their CEO, their CFO used to work at Harris. They came to Ryman together. I think it's more of just creating kind of a joint venture or partnership and realizing how they're going to operate that on a go-forward basis versus a lack of actual management ability.
Additionally, Ryman is used to sort of higher rated conventions and groups versus what's called SMERF, which is social military education